But maybe let's start off by covering the state of investment right now, Robert. We need to cover a whole lot, but we need to also outline the current state of investment. So what are some of the biggest challenges and learnings that you've seen companies needing to sort of adapt to as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I don't know how many hours we have to answer that question. The world we live in has become, virtual by necessity. Let me just start off and say I am cautiously optimistic that what I'll call the seriousness of this pandemic will resonate through this vaccination isolation, cycle, that we can all hopefully not go through a third, fourth, and fifth wave of this over the next 18, 24 months. And I'm knocking wood and hoping that our leaders, our country leaders and citizenry take this seriously and really tamp this thing down, because I think we're all tired of being in our respective homes in that respect. So let's put that out of the way. But obviously, it has disrupted some industries dramatically. Some, quite catastrophically on the one hand. Obviously, places that require the gathering of people. Even conferences now have had to, evolve and morph to hybrid environments, and will likely be hybrid environments. To other industries that actually have accelerated, not surprisingly. If you are in a digital enablement industry, you probably have some pretty attractive metrics that you're experiencing, and some people were surprised by it. We are not, because we just knew those who were in tune with this whole fourth industrial revolution knew that it was going more digital. We probably didn't realize that the pandemic would accelerate things anywhere from 3 to 10 years in specific industries, which is where we are. And so from an investor perspective, you have to think about, on the one hand, if you're not in those industries, how do you get in them, even though there's some asset inflation, which we'll talk about a little bit, and which of the industries as an investor investors are going to actually now start to benefit from the tailwinds of a post-COVID world, which is, to a great extent, Frederick, this. I mean, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know if we're going to be hybrid in 6 months or in 18 months in terms of conferences, what the restaurant densities are going to look and feel like. But the thing we have found out is, if you take some of the industries that were hit hardest, like the restaurant industry, we were able to develop code in one of our companies that actually created an efficient, curbside application process. And for some of the businesses, guess what they found out? They were actually more profitable through curbside than through in-house dining. And so that sparks a whole other, business idea or opportunity for those restaurateurs, and saying, here's a way that I can actually run my business more efficiently, through crisis create some necessity of invention. So we'll see a bit of that. I think we're also going to see a reshaping at a bigger scale. So get out of the small to medium business segments at a larger scale, a realignment of what are going to be the ERP systems and the supply chain systems. And, one of the unfortunate things that's happened over the last, call it 4, 5, 6 years, is we move from some market-based economic dynamics to politically based economic dynamics, which means people are now reshaping their supply chains, not based on working capital efficiency, but in some cases a nationalistic ideology around who should be benefiting from a particular industry. I don't think that's good overall. To be fair with you, I am truly a globalist, optimistically so in that context. But I think it's important to, as an investor, understand that means you're going to reshape supply lines, reshape, supply chains and systems, and you need to align your businesses and business models in knowing that that's going to occur. So I think that's just, I can go on for 3 days on this, but I'll stop there. But I mean, those are some of the things that as an investor you have to think about.
Yeah, I love the adaptation and the innovational part of it. It's I'm sitting here in London, so of course I gotta quote the great Winston Churchill, right, who said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And and I feel like that is what a lot of these people are doing in these industries, and especially when you look at it towards with a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, right? Saying this is the circumstances we're under and how terrible it is, but also sort of how can we leverage from it. So that's spot on. Before we move on to my questions here, Robert, one of the most upvoted questions we have gotten is from Jonas, and I'm assuming he's a fairly young fellow, because he's asking what is your sort of number one advice for young minds starting with investments?
So it depends how young. I have children, and it's so fun. It's a great question, and thank you, Jonas, for asking that question. And I'll get the reprint of this, or the rebroadcast, and get it to my kids, because I've been now working with them to think about investing and understanding the importance of, to my son, you don't need a new pair of Jordans or Yeezys. You should take that $120 or $150 and go buy some index funds or something. Really to help him understand, what, capital and the power of capital and compounding, et cetera. And so I've got a group of young men where I have conversations with once a month about these sort of things. And part of it is, form investment clubs. So one of the most important things you can do as a young person, frankly, is in spite of COVID, don't live in a vacuum. And I would highly recommend, from an investing perspective, get involved in an investing club and do it together. Because I think, and make sure that in doing that, you get a diversity of ideas, and that can be through people or backgrounds or experiences. And the good news about virtual, man, you can have a global investment club, right? Just like thousands of us are gathered here right now. You can have 12 people from anywhere in the planet, meeting once a week, once a month, talking about investments and how you might participate in that fabric. And challenge each other. Read Benjamin Graham's book. Read some of the books on from Ray Dalio and others, and think about how to become a unique investor in your time. Okay, every time period has market dynamics that lend themselves to above average performance in the investing world. And so your generation, you digital natives, which we have great envy for, should have a view of investing that is going to be just unique, B, at a pace and a clarity that call it or prior generations didn't have. But you've got to ground yourself also in the fundamentals. So this, when you think about second thing, form some groups to invest. Second thing is steep yourself, become knowledgeable about what investing actually is. And think about it as an investor, not as a gambler, okay? Because a lot of people think they're investors because they can buy stock, but they actually haven't done the work, and they actually don't understand, fundamentally why that is a valuable asset to own at this point in time. And so you need to steep yourself in the knowledge of what investing actually is. And then the third thing is, don't be afraid to try and to fail. So I think those are the three lessons that I would share today in this brief time for young investors to engage in, but do it and try it. I mean, the capital process on this planet is going to continue to formation, accelerate. As there's every economy out there today is driving massive amounts of liquidity to the extent they can to try to overwhelm the effects that COVID is having on those economic environments, which creates an opportunity to invest unlike any other. And so there's a chance for many of you folks to really take advantage of that, but do it in a way that is holistic in your approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I actually just want to give a brief congratulations to Jonas, because I saw that he's asked two questions there, and then both of them are the most upvoted questions in here. So obviously a lot of people are sharing your points of view. So that's awesome. But I think a great piece of advice there, Robin, and especially with the investment club. And again, it's so easy right now to gather inspiration and knowledge from all over the world by settings such as these, but also just in the social media platforms. I think you can really get together and share that knowledge. So I, for once, absolutely ditto that. Robert, when you're looking back at over sort of the past 12 months, and so you mentioned the restaurant industry and so forth, but what are some of the, I guess, sort of financial loopholes that you have seen work best? Now, we discussed a bit about some of the challenges in the various industries. Are there any sorts of, assets or any sorts of specific investments, without getting too concrete in these, that you have made that have, where you've sort of seen a hole in the market?
Yeah, so we live in a unique world at Vista, and I'll tell you a little bit about why I say that way.
Yeah.
We're in the world of enterprise software, so this is business software. So we're not in the consumer software business per se. Certain of our businesses have some consumer-facing engines or applications associated with them, but for the most part, it's business and enterprise software. The thing about our space that we have been very effective at doing, not just as investors in terms of our returns and loss ratios and that sort of a thing, but we identified early on the efficacy of what we all, we call it, on-demand companies, right? Or, everyone talks about them as SaaS, or, call it native cloud, or those sort of things. And what that did was it fundamentally changed the dynamic of development and development costs. Back in the olden days, when you wanted to start a software company, you'd have to spend millions of dollars and get, tens of millions of dollars of funding to buy computers and, IT, service support people to work for you and create a facility and write code and develop it. I mean, it was a massive, massive amount of investment that you'd have to make to build these solutions, and then you have to build a go-to-market engine that required, I call it, shoe leather, and people out on the street with a bag, and I've got software for an insurance company, I've got software for a broker, I've got and they'd actually have to go sell that, and then then you have to go get it, and then you'd have to go put a system in place and install it and configure it and train them, and it was just a heavy lift to actually invest in that space, but there are some rewards to it. The enterprise software world is, in essence, I call it 95% gross margin businesses. There's no inventory. You build it once, you sell it as many times as you want.
Yeah.
And most importantly, for your customers, it's the most productive tool that they can introduce into their business systems. I mean, it's more productive than stock buybacks or Six Sigma or energy efficiency, which you bring into an operating environment. And so, it was worth the investment for your customers once you demonstrated the ROI of the products that you sell. So you take all that. Well, what has now happened, and something we identified a long time ago, is this new on-demand or hosted SaaS environment companies. You went from millions of dollars to, I call it a credit card in essence, to gain access to as much computing power as you wanted, and unlimited connectivity within constraints to that computing power. And now you can start to develop applications. And oh, by the way, systems, some of our companies do this, have the ability to now market those applications to a potential customer basis, demonstrate the ROI. You don't actually have to leave your chair, implement the solution, in a hosted environment, and then your customers gain all the benefit. And you might not have one personal interaction. You see what I mean? So what that does, it actually creates a massive amount of investment opportunity in our space. Now, don't get too excited, because here's the issue. 98% of those companies are private. So you actually, as an investor, can't invest in them unless you're investing through a fund like ours, or folks who invest in that space. So there's the interesting world that we live in. And at certain market segments, there are just very few people who can actually participate in that space. Now, there's, of course, always strategics who can always participate, and the big public companies can kind of go buy whatever with these $500 billion market cap, right? But in often case, they may not be nimble enough or effective enough to actually affect the transformational activities that are required in those small to medium software companies. So from our perspective, one of the unique things we do is we have a whole practice built around these founders of businesses who are running these software companies, are now 100 million, 200 million, 300, 400, 500 million dollars in revenues. And when you talk to them, this is the company they're running that day is the biggest company they've ever been in. So the challenges, this got to your earlier kind of inference around, okay, what are the challenges as an entrepreneur? Where do you gain insights about how to run your business? The early days of Vista, well, here's how we're going to help you on your software and your services department, or development department, or your go-to-market department more effectively. Now we're helping them, okay, how do you now take this $200 million software company growing at 22% and make it a $400 million software company growing at 40% at 30% margin? Okay, those are how we have morphed our business to address those challenges in the marketplace, which you have to do at scale, because most of those executives, he or she is kind of sitting in their office by themselves with their own people, where I've got 68 software company CEOs or CXOs who they can talk to every single day, in addition to my operating MDs and my Vista Consulting group, to talk about shared services and best practices and go to centers of excellence that we've developed all around the world to help them build their business more efficiently and more effectively. Again, I call it the engineer's mindset to how do you invest at scale in a process as opposed to rely on single instance of experience from one person. So that's how we do it. And I think that's one of the dynamics that makes investing in enterprise software unique and sustainable in the long term.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think those are extremely valid points. And I think you also, that was almost a conversation for another day, right? The whole entrepreneurial mindset, where do you get the inspiration from? Because that is the whole topic in itself.